Medfield TV presents Meet the Candidates, interviews with our citizens running for local offices. This series is being brought to you by the joint efforts of Carol Mayer, Town Clerk, Kathleen Emerson, Medfield High School Social Studies Chair, as well as the staff of Medfield TV. I'm Matthias Epstein from Medfield High School, and I will be posing questions to the candidate. He will have 2 minutes to respond to each question. At the end of the questioning period, the candidate will have 2 additional minutes to address the TV audience. Today, we are interviewing Leo BREHM. He is a candidate running for the office of school committee. This position is for a 3-year term. There is 1 position open, and he is running opposed. How are you doing today?
I'm wonderful, and thank you, Matthias.
Thank you. What does the school committee do?
So the school committee has 2 primary responsibilities. One is to set policy for the school district, and the other is budget. But obviously, setting policy is sets the rules for how the schools are to be governed. Mm-hmm. And it's everything from, what you can bring to school in your book bag to, where the priorities are for the budget that could come out of policies, such as things as class size, which is one of the reasons people have a lot of interest in the school committee race this year. The school committee also represents that connection between the community itself and the school community. The school community is made up of, lots of teachers, and students, and they come from different places, and they play a large role in how the community is shaped, and the reflections of what happens in the schools reflects the community itself. And the school committee kind of represents that linchpin that allows that to happen in between the two.
Right. And what would you say is your favorite thing about this position, or what do you like about this position?
So I like the role that the school committee plays in that piece which connects to the community itself. And I've had the opportunity to, in my profession, to work in places where the school committee plays a really large role in reflecting the values of the community at large, and ensuring that those values are represented accordingly in those policies, in the priorities taken around school budgets, and how spending is aligned and planned for to ensure that those values are upheld over time.
And so why would you say you're running?
So I'm running for 2 main reasons. One is that education, although my profession, I never have considered it a job. So education is not work for me. It is just particularly what I love to be a part of. And in particular, my background has been heavily in next generation of learning. So beginning in technology and then continuing on into administration and supporting teaching and learning, not through the use of just technology, but building strong culture in schools, and that connection back to the community plays a really large role in that.
Mm-hmm. And what do you plan on doing going forward to improve this position if elected?
Well, I think it's less about improving the position as it is moving forward or progressing well. So I think there's always room for growth in anything you're involved in, and we have a wonderful school district here. It's the reason why my family and I moved here. My wife, who's also an educator, and I, the schools are the absolute first thing we look at when we're looking at communities to move to. There still has to be that room for growth, and being able to reach goals strategically that serve the community well. Mm-hmm. So, that's what I'm hoping to bring to the table is using my experience and that vision for the future to make Medfield schools even better.
That's great. And does the school committee work on their own, or does it collaborate with other town officials?
They definitely work with other town officials, and it's actually extremely important, particularly around the budgetary part of. It's always a very tough balance that small towns have to play between schools and the rest of the community at large, because they're all coming from the same pot of money, and so that's where those values come into play, where you have to be able to work accordingly with other school departments and plan accordingly to help each other meet their goals, so that we have safe roads and fire departments, as well as nice school buildings, and plenty of teachers to offer the broad programming that you want to see at the high school.
And related to budgeting, what does the school committee do when there are large unexpected expenses like Dale Street School?
So the Dale Street School, which is and I know the school committee is very excited that it's called an MSBA project, or the Massachusetts School Building Authority project. And so that means that there's an opportunity for the town to receive a certain percentage of reimbursement. And I believe it's around the high 48% or area of reimbursement, which means if we spent $100 million on the school, which we're not, we would get $48 million back based on that. And so, like any large project like that, the school committee obviously has to work with the town to garner support for that throughout the community itself. And so, a lot of questions that remain to be answered is just exactly how that Dale Street project is going to serve the school community. And so that's why they begin with something called the feasibility study. And so the feasibility study will help unpack how Medfield should best use its, best use this opportunity to move the schools forward, not only for 2 to 3 years, but 3 to 5 years, 6 to 7 years. And it's very hard to do. I understood that the Memorial School was renovated, within the last 2 decades, and seemingly it seems to be full. So, which is impacting things like programming and class size, because you just don't have the extra space to put people in. So that's where some of that strategic planning and those feasibility studies come into play. They help the school districts plan accordingly and working with the towns at the same time.
Mm-hmm. And what is your stance on class size, and what plans do you have to keep the class size optimized for learning?
Well, class size is a result of other values, and that's around like student-centered learning or student-based decisions. So what is the best way to, what does the best environment for learning look like? And the school committee's role is to support what that vision is and help devise policy on what that vision looks like. And a small class size allows that to happen. So, and that's why school districts set class size policies as guidelines. So I was in Sharon for 14 years, and we had a strong class size policy that stated when classes at certain grade levels hit a certain number of students, then we would hire additional teachers or create extra space in order to ensure that we had optimal student-to-teacher ratios that allowed the teacher to, make those connections that needed to be, just exactly how you learn best. If you can reflect on, your elementary experience, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so always knew that you liked these kinds of books, or in particular liked a certain kind of content, and teachers do that because that's their craft. And they love to do it. So they love helping a student succeed and meeting you where you are as a student, and then moving you forward. It's not just about hitting that standard. It's about how do we exceed that standard.
And what happens when town organizations disagree?
Well, they have to learn to get to agree. Yes, I mean, it's the democratic process, which is one of the reasons why I'm running for school committee. The democratic process is about raising the level of conversation. So it's not about anyone's personal goals, or it shouldn't be. It should really be about raising the level of conversation to better the community as a whole. And disagreement is a part of that level of conversation. And that's why we have these committees. It's not so that we can all just get along, but we can learn to, the school committee, we have a school committee to represent the schools accordingly, and then the rest of the town are representing their interests as well. And the dialogue that happens between them should help us come to a amenable plan that helps us meet everyone's goals over time.
And you mentioned your work in Sharon. What else should the voters know about you?
Well, I've been in education, this is my 22nd year. The bulk of my career, I was 14 years in Sharon as an administrator, and then I was 5 years in the Newton Public Schools, the city of Newton, also as a school administrator. And in that time, I've had wonderful experiences and worked with great people and really learned to appreciate teachers and the power of how teachers meet their students where they are when you've created the correct environment and given them the resources to succeed. And so I think it's because of that experience and working with at least 4 or 5 different school committees in that time that it's given me some experience that I think I can bring to the table about how to best not only work with our school leaders and with other school committee members, but work with the town as a whole. And I reflect on my time in Sharon quite a bit because it's a similar size district here to Medfield, and it's a community that values their schools, and the schools were always high on the priority list when it came to any aspect of transformation in the town. And that included the 4 building projects that we engaged in. We had 3 MSBA projects that that I had the ability to participate in, and that I'm actually really proud of. And in conjunction, working with the town on their budget goals, as well as the schools and the town work together to achieve the goals together over time, and at the same time maintain those policies that I mentioned before. We were able to, build 4 new buildings or renovate a couple of buildings at the same time, and still maintain the class sizes that we had hoped we could maintain, along with the other broad programming, K-12. We had quite a few program offerings at our high school that we were able to maintain throughout my career there.
And what other hobbies or talents do you have besides town government?
Is town government a hobby? So my family and I, we like the outdoors. So we do quite a bit of hiking here in Medfield, and travel is one of our hobbies. So we've not the whole family, but my wife and I have been as far as China and many parts of Europe. So we enjoy that, as well as our hiking and boating and activities. Technology is always a big hobby of mine, of course, with my background based in technology.
Yeah, and would you please take a few moments to speak to the audience?
Sure. I guess a few things that I hope that people know is I intend to use my extensive experience in leadership in schools to just make Medfield schools better and plan for the future. We intend to be here for a long time, and I'm hoping that my experience can help build a future in our schools that will long outlast my time with the committee. And and thank you very much. Get out and vote.
Please remember that democracy is not a spectator sport. Please vote at the Center on Icehouse Road on Monday, March 26th from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m.
They definitely work with other town officials, and it's actually extremely important, particularly around the budgetary part of. It's always a very tough balance that small towns have to play between schools and the rest of the community at large, because they're all coming from the same pot of money, and so that's where those values come into play, where you have to be able to work